Hello, Maze fans. This is clip number 7 in my commentary for Maze. In the previous clips, I had talked a lot about the book itself, what we know for sure about the nature of clues, and the 3 categories of rooms. Also, how, like most rabid fans of the book, I'm stuck in this reverse engineering problem of having already found the shortest path solution through a lot of trial and error, and now trying to determine what clues the author intended. Actually, this applies not only to the rooms of the shortest path, but to almost all the other rooms of the maze. There is, more often than not, always a correct door to take. As I've said in previous clips, sometimes more than one correct option, depending on the direction you're going. So, more specifically, I talked in part 4 about what I mean by a correct door. Well, anyway, in the previous clip or two, I started getting into some specific guesses about clues, and in this clip, I want to continue that. Namely, I want to look at some of the specific rooms where I'm 99% certain I figured out one or more of the author's intended clues to pick the correct door. Now, I'm not claiming that I'm the first person to ever figure out some of these things. In fact, I've been happy to see that some other fans of the book have come to some of these same conclusions because I think that lends a lot of credibility to the guesses. In any case, my hunch is that if we get a better idea of the way the author uses clues, then we might get at then we might get at recognizing clues in other rooms as opposed to dreaming up too many rationalizations that aren't very convincing. That's what we're trying to avoid. So if you've been enjoying these clips, please give this clip a like. That will help me out. It's much appreciated. And as I should not have to tell you by now, this clip does have some major spoilers in it. So if you are not familiar with the book or have not already figured out the shortest path, or at least some way to reach room 45, I would urge you to stop watching these clips, or any other clips about Maze for that matter, and instead solve the book on your own, at least finding the shortest path. Don't give up and let somebody on the internet give you all the spoilers and ruin the fun. Anyway, let's continue. I said I was going to talk about some rooms where I'm almost certain I figured out the author's intended clues, or at least one of them for a given room. Now, there are 2 rooms that each have only one exit, and there's room 24, which has no exits. I'm not going to bother talking about those rooms in this clip because if we're not really given a choice, then I would argue there is no clue for a correct door to be found, per se. However, I do think these particular rooms may contain clues that apply to other rooms in the book. Regardless, that will have to wait until another clip. I'm going to talk instead about some of the other rooms. Most of these ones that I'll be talking about are path rooms, but there are also some trap and some loop rooms among them. We'll talk about in this clip and the next. So let's start with room 12. Now, room 12 is one of the 2 deja vu rooms, as they've been nicknamed. So there's a second room in Maze, which room 12 looks almost identical to. As for the letter U and D you see over in the corner on the right, those have something to do with the riddle of the maze, which is a whole separate discussion. So instead, let's look at the men in the paintings here. Okay, on the rear left, there's a guy holding 2 fingers. On the rear right, there's a guy holding 2 fingers in one hand and 1 finger on the other. And finally, on the lower left, there's a guy who looks like he just finished a meal. So, we have 2 fingers, then 2 and 1 fingers, or 21, and then somebody who just ate. Well, ate, A-T-E, sounds just like the word for the number 8, E-I-G-H-T. And the doors in these rooms go to 2, 21, 8, and 39. So the only one not represented is 39. We have the 2 fingers here for the 2. We have the 2 and the 1 for 21. We have somebody who just ate for number 8. And so the only one not included is 39, and that is the solution. As you're taking the shortest path from room 1 to 45 and back, you pass through room 12, this room here, on the way back from room 45. And the next exit you should take to get you closer to room 1 is room 39. Now, notice, though, that I said that this applies if you're traveling from room 45 to room 1. If you're traveling from room 1 to room 45, it is possible to stumble into this room, namely from room 2, in which case the correct door to take is to get back to room 2, which you could have only gotten from room 29. Maybe in that case, you see that 2 of the men are holding 2 fingers in a hand, and the plate has 2 bones in it, and you get room 2 that way. But I think the indication here for 39 is, for me at least, too strong to ignore. And of course, maybe that's not the only way to solve this room. Maybe within the picture or in the dialogue, there's an additional clue that indicates 39, this ladder down here. I don't know. But knowing through trial and error that 39 is correct, I'm really confident that the reasoning I just described with the paintings is really how the author expected readers to choose the right door. Now, instead of following 39 right now, let's look at another example of a room with a solution I'm 99% sure I've gotten. Let's go to room 32. Now, there's a bit of comical drawing and dialogue here. There's kind of a hint that a statue came to life and broke through the wall, or at least that was my interpretation. Now, if you're looking at this room for the first time, you might think, well, somebody broke through and made an exit because they got trapped trying the other ways. So maybe that is the right way, the one where they cheated and broke through the wall. I should take the exit here to room 11 on the left. Unfortunately, no, that is certainly not the right room. We know that room 11 is one of the 7 trap rooms, so we do not want to go through there. Okay, so what else do we see in this room? Well, there's a sign up here on the upper left that says sea bag okay. Now, what is a sea bag? A sea bag is actually a big, long bag with a drawstring on the top. I used to have one myself back in college for my laundry bag. I guess they're called sea bags because officers in the Navy had them. And if we look in front of the rear doorway, we do see 3 sea bags. So is 6 actually the correct choice? Well, the answer is no. 6 is another one of the trap rooms. On a side note, sea bag is one word, but on the sign we see that it's 2 words. Well, this leaves 2 other exits in any case. There's 16 and 28. Now, 16 is a loop room, whereas 28 is a path room. So 28 is the correct door to take, without a doubt. Another important fact here is that the only way to get into room 32 at all is by taking the exit that's in room 28 that goes to 32. There are absolutely no other exits in the entire book that take us to room 32. So in other words, if we ever enter room 32, the correct exit is to go back the way we came through 28. Okay, well, knowing that that is the solution, are there any indications of this? What might have been the intended clue from the author? Well, we see a bird with its back turned to us here in the upper right. This is the same kind of bird we saw in room 21. As I said back in clip number 6, it seemed this bird combined with the wrench and the serpent picture that was in that other room were all together saying, turn around. And here we see that the bird, that same bird is over the exit back to 28. But let's go back to that banner that's on the left side of the wall, sea bag okay. Well, if we take the word sea SEA, and replace it with the letter C, we get the letters C, BAG, OK. If we unscramble those, we get the two words go back. And before we move on to another room, I think there are a few important things to learn just from this room here. So one, the author is going to put in some things to mislead you. As he said in the book's directions, not all clues are necessarily trustworthy. As he says on the back of the book in the description, some clues may be put there for your misinterpretation. However, as he also said in the introduction, there are any number of clues to help you pick the correct door. So here, it wasn't just one definitive clue that tells us to go back. I see at least two. I see the Seabag OK sign when you unscramble it, and the bird here as well. And another point here is that Manson certainly has some clues that are built on wordplay or puns. Also notice that we didn't really have to do any elaborate arithmetic or long trails of deductive reasoning to interpret a clue. And since the bird means the same thing in the room I mentioned, room 21, the other place we see the bird turning its back, then maybe, just maybe, some of the other objects that show up in multiple rooms in Maze have some common meaning. So those are all things which I think are worth considering. Now let's move on to another room. Let's go to room 29. Now, I warned you all the way back in clip 1 or 2 that I would be giving spoilers, and this is one of the biggest spoilers of the whole book. Years ago, I remember reading an angry review of Maze on Amazon, and the reviewer said, "I copied down the exits of each and every room and put it through a computer program to mathematically map all possible solutions, and it is mathematically impossible to get from room 1 to room 45. And I even had somebody comment on one of my own clips and say, "Hey, why don't you just ignore all the clues and map the rooms into a computer program and find the shortest path that way?" Well, my answer to that as to why I did not do that is the same reason I don't look at the goddamn answers to a crossword puzzle without trying it first. It stupidly defeats the whole purpose in enjoying a puzzle. But second of all, the person who left that comment apparently missed the part in the clip where I said that I had already found the shortest path years ago. And as I keep saying, trying to find the clues, we're reverse engineering this. And third and finally, that kind of cowardly cheating to try to map it out, with a computer program, it didn't work for the angry Amazon reviewer, and it won't work for other cheaters either, because you have to actually look at the rooms more carefully. Because lo and behold, room 29 contains a hidden exit. And it's absolutely vital that you take this hidden exit in order to reach room 45. Now, before I go further, here is something I don't think I've ever seen mentioned on Into the Abyss, that website, or the Maze Cast podcast. It is possible that you might cross this room as you try to find your way back from room 45 to 1. And in that case, taking the exit to room 2 or room 8 is the way to go. Now, maybe there are some intended clues for this situation. I see that there are 8 candles. I also see a figure 8 in the hourglass carving, the little, ribbon that's here. I also see, it was just that. But like I said, you can't get to room 45 in the first place without getting to this room first, room 29, and finding the secret exit. So let's take a closer look. We see a man standing on his head. Also above the doors, we see some pictures. Do any of these pictures have anything in common? Well, let's move here from the right to the left. We see a spatula. Well, a spatula is something you use to flip a burger over, say. Next is a key. A key works by turning it around in a lock. We get salt and pepper shakers. We saw salt and pepper shakers on another door. I think it was 42. But instead of two shakers, one was a shaker and one was a grinder, but we see two shakers here. And shakers work only when you turn them upside down. And the same with a bottle over here on the left. Now, I skipped the leaf. The leaf seems to be the odd one out here. But we don't want room 40. That's a trap. So, what the leaf has in common with everything else, I don't know. I suppose there's the phrase turning over a new leaf, or the notion of a leaf turning brown and falling to the ground. It seems like a stretch. But I think when you combine all of this with the man standing on his head, it's telling us to turn things upside down. So, turn the page upside down. The table is not really a table. The candle holders are not all candle holders. As it says in the dialogue, blindness is no disadvantage to finding your way out without any directions. As for the directions up and on, let's ignore those for now because they pertain to the riddle of the maze. Let's get back to the table that isn't really a table. So we also see a doorknob. You might think that that was a ball on the top of the blind man's staff, but notice that the other staffs on the other side of the room don't have that. So no, that is a doorknob for the door to room 17, the big secret door. Now, one more curiosity I noticed, if we go back and look at room 1, we see all of this paper on the ground with symbols on them, and in the bottom left, it looks like the word hi is upside down. And if we turn this page upside down, we see what looks like a 17 above it. So maybe this is another clue about the special 17 door. I don't know. Now, let's actually go to room 17, because here's another room I think is worth mentioning in terms of my confidence in intended clues. I'm sure that when Christopher Manson wrote Maze, he expected there would be people flipping through the pages, trying to find any, rooms that have doors to room 45, and then trying to work backwards. Now, there are 3 rooms in Maze which have exits to room 45. However, this is the only room you can reach on a path from room 1 without having already visited room 45 first. The other 2 rooms with doors to room 45 are themselves rooms which you can only reach directly from room 45 itself. So there are doors that go back and forth. Now, there is a door leading from 45 back here to 17 as well. So you could reach 45, then turn around room 17, and then take room 33 back to the loop, and eventually get to room 1 that way. It's not the shortest path, but it's still some way to get from room 45 back to room 1. But let's assume instead that you're on your way to room 45. So you found the secret door, and then you're here. So the obvious choice out of these 3 doors is the one to room 45. So do we really need a clue? I saw somebody point out that there were 4 jugs or vases to the left and 5 to the right. Okay. The narrator says amphore, I pronounced. Empty, of course. Well, that's a reference to the types of vases here, but I've still never figured out what that might mean. I've heard some speculate that it refers to the sign on the wall over here on the left. That's part of the riddle. Y-O-U-R. You take those as the 4 letters of the same name, and it's the word your. So, although you could fill in the blanks with almost anything, what you should do is pronounce them empty. Empty, I pronounced empty, of course. So, that's a guess I've heard based on that. It seems to make sense to me. But having said all of that, I think the real clever part is next in the dialogue, where the narrator tries to say, your choices are more limited than you think, and that the maze is like a machine working hard at confusion. I really think that this is just a self reference to get around the fact that there really isn't any confusion. You should take the obvious door, even though the narrator is trying to confuse you. Then again, some other people think all of that is just more reference to the sign. But as I said earlier, it is possible that you can re enter this room from 45 on your way back and take room 33 to get into the loop, but eventually find your way back to room 1. Nonetheless, again, it won't be the shortest path, but it is still a path. And you don't want room 6 because that is a trap room. Now, as for any indication that you should take 33, if you came out of 45, I don't know. There are suns on the door frame. We've seen suns on some of the correct doors in the maze, but I think on some incorrect doors too. So I'm not sure. I did notice that this room is described as having a sand floor, and 33 has no floor. It makes me think of an hourglass. In fact, one could argue that the map of the path rooms are not an infinity shape necessarily, but an hourglass shape. But of course, now my mind is going down that rabbit hole, so let's stop here. In the next clip, I'm going to talk more about the trap rooms. Thank you for listening.